his younger years, when he had conducting posts in provincial opera houses, Carlos Kleiber had a very wide repertoire. But by the time that he was at the helm of this performance here in Vienna in March 1994, he was conducting just a small handful of his favourite works now and again. And this music, Der Rosenkavalier of Richard Strauss, was one of his very favourites. Being so immensely in demand now, Kleiber was able to choose his ideal cast of singers a long way in advance, and he had the luxury of working with them individually and personally well before the full rehearsal period began. That was vital for him, because he needed a creative two-way communication between the singers and him so that he could blend their personal views of their roles with his very decisive overall views of the opera. Of course, they and he had to be in agreement, and there was never any remote doubt that he was completely in charge. But what singers found so very special and also very challenging about working with Kleiber was his deep involvement with the texts and the characterizations of their parts, and the uniquely inspirational way he conveyed this to them.
He was so charismatic. I think everybody wanted to do their utmost best for him because the orchestra adored him and we all did. And he knew the text inside out and he wanted it all to be completely intelligible. Friends of mine came to a performance and said it was like chamber music, and sometimes they wished they could hear more of the orchestra, but for the singers it was absolutely brilliant because we could take this intimate text and really just sing to each other and know that the audience could hear us.
He was absolutely, for my taste, the best conductor for the Rosenkavalier. He understood it so well, and he was a marvellous musician and a magical conductor, the way he moved and how he looked, the radiance that he had. He was a wonderful, wonderful conductor.
The Marschallin is a glamorous, sophisticated and aristocratic princess in her early 30s, and she is the wife of a field marshal who she never wanted to marry but was forced to do so. She is having a romantic and indeed passionate secret affair with the adolescent young Count Octavian Roffrano. It's his first affair, and although he is besotted with her, the Marschallin knows that it's only a matter of time before he will find a lover and wife of his own age. In her Act 1 monologue, while she is on her own for a while, she reflects on the inevitability of aging. Her own young years are already waning.
For the singers, it was absolutely wonderful, and he had a brilliant way of talking to the orchestra or to us and telling us with wonderful imagery how to do things. He wanted the colours in the orchestra to reflect the thoughts, that the colour has to change in the orchestra to reflect the melancholy that's happening to the Marschallin and the one eye wet, one eye dry sort of feeling of when she's talking about time and how it's so extraordinary that one was the young girl and while one will be the old lady and yet one is the same, absolutely the same.
For the immensely demanding Carlos Kleiber, this performance of Der Rosenkavalier was his dream situation. He was conducting the Vienna State Opera Orchestra, and his ideal hand-picked cast of Felicity Lott as the Marschallin, and Sophie von Otter as Octavian, and Barbara Bonney as Sophie von Faninau, the beautiful young daughter of an ignorant and wealthy social climber who has prearranged that she will marry someone she has never met, the equally ignorant and somewhat coarse and vulgar Baron Ochs. The deal being that Herr von Faninau becomes a member, so to speak, of the aristocracy, and Baron Ochs, who is short of money, becomes wealthy. He will then have also an attractive girl that he can, well, let's say, fondle and play with. He's a lot older than she is. When Sophie meets him for the first time, she's appalled, and in any case, she has already started to feel private stirrings of emotion for someone else, Octavian. And that has happened when he presented a silver rose to her, the traditional engagement ceremony arranged by an aristocratic family, and in this case the Marschallin nominated Octavian to present the rose. He too felt powerful private stirrings of emotion for Sophie as he was presenting the rose to her.
Barbara Bonney, us two, and Felicity Lott. We made up the female trio of voices that Kleiber said that he was so fond of, so we got to sing this piece with him, and he was really very, very sweet to us and called us his three ladies whom he loved, and so that's very flattering, and we loved him back, and this particular duet with Sophie is really fantastic.
When Baron Ochs arrives with Sophie's father and behaves very coarsely, it doesn't take long for Octavian and Sophie to agree mutually that Sophie will not be marrying the Baron, who is in any case very keen indeed to make love, if he can, to Mariandel. He doesn't know that she is in fact Octavian in disguise, for a reason that happened near the start of the opera. With the help of two intriguers, Octavian lays a trap for Ochs to expose him in the third act, which begins with a rehearsal of a charade that has been prepared to frighten him when he arrives in a room in an inn to where Mariandel has invited him for a nice, cosy dinner.
People are going to pop out of cupboards and, the kind of magical aspect of it, crazy and magical and terribly light. And he told the violinists that they should feel as though they were shaking the notes out of their sleeve. And, it's a lovely image, that.
Although Carlos Kleiber was so very specific in his demands of all the performers, he very much wanted the singers to give their own personal interpretations within the overall framework of his very precise concept.
He was very, very strict in the rehearsals, absolutely, so you all knew where you were. But then in the performance, it was amazing. I mean, things like the trio, where he would give me as long as I wanted at the beginning of it, but then gradually you felt this amazing energy always underneath, driving through the trio when it starts building up and up and up, we're all up there on the high notes.
In the great and moving trio at the end of Der Rosenkavalier, the Marschallin gives up Octavian to Sophie. Octavian is very emotional about this. He had never expressed his love for Sophie openly, and neither had she expressed her love for him openly. But the Marschallin has understood their private feelings, and it is now time for her to say goodbye to her romantic affair. And in a later podcast in this 6-podcast series commemorating the inspirational genius of Carlos Kleiber, you can hear Dame Felicity Lott, his favourite Marschallin, read some of the letters he wrote to her about Der Rosenkavalier.